Hi students, I'm Una.
And I'm Scott.
I'm a PTE teacher from the UK.
I'm also a PTE teacher from the UK.
And we've been helping students pass their exams for years.
And now we're excited to help you pass your exam too.
Welcome to the Swoosh English PTE podcast.
Let's get started.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the PTE podcast here at Swoosh English. My name is Una.
And I'm Scott.
And today we are looking at the listening section of the PTE exam. We're going to look at the task, fill in the blanks.
Fill in the blanks is a very interesting task for me because obviously a lot of students are probably more familiar with reading a given text and inserting the answers from a various list of answer options rather than listening for an answer too. So I believe it does actually bring out a much larger set of skills that maybe some students might have underutilized.
Yeah, and for example, you have to be able to read as you are going through with that listening and making sure that you're able to, be aware of what word is missing as it's coming up and know that, I need to really switch on here and make sure I can fill in that word.
Yeah, it's important. So hopefully we're going to have a good bit of fun with this podcast today in trying out some of those skills that we might have overlooked as a student, especially when it comes to listening for specific information.
Yeah, like you said, students might think, this one's easy.
I don't think any task is necessarily easy if you're not prepared for it. And this is one that I think does require a little bit more of specific information and knowledge. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. So it just makes sure it means that you need to have a good range of vocabulary again to be able to recognize those words. And of course, have good grammatical knowledge. If you're stuck and you heard part of the word, you think it's the word, but what form of the word is it? But of course, we'll get into a lot of that today as we talk through listening, fill in the blanks.
We will indeed. So maybe we can start off today by going through an overview of the task so the students know exactly what they have to do and what to expect on the day.
Of course. Yes, so listening,
Too much.
Fill in the blanks. You have 2 to 3 different questions within this item type on the day. And there is a 7-second countdown before the audio begins. And the recording is 30 to 60 seconds long.
Yeah, it would be quite nasty if the task just started straight away and students didn't have any time to prepare themselves for the listening.
Oh no, always there is a bit of time that you can take the time to focus and prepare yourself for the task. Yeah,
just be aware of that on the day, that you will have that time to, just prepare yourself, get ready for the day and make sure that you're ready just to start listening and really focusing on that task.
Yes, and of course, depending on the task, in that 7 seconds, you might do more than simply focus and get ready. You might actually skim the text or, look through whatever question you have been given. You might use that time for different things, like potentially, we will get into that in listening, fill in the blanks. But yeah, definitely focusing in that 7-second time is good. So that's an overview.
We're forgetting also to talk about how we're assessed in listening and writing.
Yes.
So the listening skills and writing skills are both assessed for this. Obviously, you're going to listen to the transcript and write down your answer.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about spelling and how important that is.
Spelling
very soon
is very important in this task. Yes, definitely.
And how long are the listening excerpts that the students have to listen to?
Yes, so I said 30 to 60 seconds for the recording. Yeah. And then afterwards, of course, we'll talk about time management as we go through, but usually we recommend, 30 seconds, maximum 60 seconds to just go through and confirm your answers.
And that's just kind of sticking into the general gist and understanding that we only spend about 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 30 seconds per task. So we can say maybe 60 seconds listening and 60 seconds obviously finalizing your answers, but you might not need that time.
Yeah,
but you do have that time if we actually divide the amount of time per task on average with every task in the examination section.
Very good. So how are you scored then for this task?
Well, scoring is quite simple. You are simply scored 1 point for every word that you not only recognize as incorrect, but also spell correctly.
Spell correctly, yes.
So even if you obviously identify the correct word or the incorrect word and then misspell it, you don't get a point for your response.
So you mean the correct word for fill in the blank. So you're just writing down the word. So if you actually write down the correct word, but you spell it just a little bit off, then you lose a point.
You don't get a point for it. Spelling is essential for this.
Okay.
And then simply also 0 for an incorrect word or a non-response as well.
Yes.
So that's why spelling is highly essential to this task.
Okay, very good. And then we'll just have a look now at some questions and talk about listening skills in general, shall we?
I think these questions are good for students to really analyze and really comprehend exactly where your listening is as well as your other abilities, so you can really just see how good your language skills are for this test.
Definitely. So perhaps, do you work in an English-speaking environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And why is that very important?
Well, of course, if you work in an English-speaking environment, then your listening skills are going to be tested more every day. You're having to listen to different speakers in English, for every task or everything that you have to do. So that's going to be improving your listening skills.
Exactly. So if you do happen to be in an environment where you're constantly listening to and speaking in English, then please make the most of that, because not only are you obviously listening to a variety of speakers who might talk differently in terms of their intonation, their stress patterns, and most importantly, their accents, but you're also getting to respond to that and actually make active improvements during that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So if you do that, then you're lucky, I guess.
Yeah.
You're lucky in preparing for the PTE exam. And if you don't work in an English-speaking environment, well, then do you practice your listening skills on a daily basis? Are you listening to podcasts? Are you listening to different recordings that you can then really ask yourself, okay, did I understand what was being said there?
Yeah, so maybe a good way of doing that would be obviously taking an understanding of what the gist of the recording is, maybe trying to pause the recording and taking down notes of some key details as well. So we like to promote active listening as well, and this can be done in your own time very, very easily. Just constantly assess what you've heard in terms of really understanding the content.
Yeah, that's a really good point, active listening.
All right. So also speaking about podcasts in regards to what you listen to, we want to know how often that you actually listen to academic lectures or talks in English as well. Why do you think that's so important for students to do outside of their PTE preparation?
Well, of course, you want to keep building up all the vocabulary that you can and being able to recognize the pronunciation as well of lots of these words. So maybe you know the word, but when it comes to actually hearing it be, said, you are less familiar with it. And even you might hear one of the word forms, but, and you think, oh, it's definitely that word, but it was another form, So making sure that you're just improving your vocabulary. And of course, listening daily will improve your vocabulary also.
It is. So maybe keeping a vocabulary list in your own time as well. Write down any new words you hear and try and actually understand what they mean in the grand context. If you're unsure, then add that to your own vocabulary journal. So these are all very, very good skills you can use outside of PTE preparation. Just prepare your language skills in relation to listening as well as writing and spelling, etc. as well.
Definitely. And, when you are listening, try to summarize. So do you summarize things like in 1 or 2 sentences, So don't just listen and say, okay, yes, I understood that, move on. Try and summarize it yourself, either out loud to your friend, perhaps, who is listening with you, or you could simply write down a summary. And of course, our summarizing skills are essential in different tasks throughout the PTE exam. So just work on summarizing what you heard and put it into, smaller sentences, shorter sentences to repeat back. Yeah. So what about our last question then?
I guess we're going to talk about then, I suppose, are you able to listen and write at the same time?
Or listen and read at the
same time? Listen and read and listen and write. So are you able to just simply divide your skills, your active enabling skills with other skills as well? And are you able to multitask effectively in the task? Because a lot of PTE academic prompts will often involve you utilizing more than just one of the main skills. For example, with this task here, you're going to be listening and writing at the same time.
Yeah.
So how good are you at doing that effectively?
Yeah, exactly. Being able to, maintain that concentration in terms of listening and being able to fully understand the meaning of what is being said while also reading something or writing down something. Those are skills that we need to work on.
It is.
Because like you said, we do often just work on one individually. But we need to work on them both together for the PTE exam.
So let's try and put some of those ideas together now, but what we've just assessed with the self-reflection questions and how we can apply them to our given task today, which is fill in the blanks, shall we?
So we shall work through the method?
Let's go through the method of this task. So we do start off with a 7-second pre-listening section. Is there anything students can do in that time to maximize their own abilities and their own scores?
So, of course, you have a text with fill in the blanks. You have the text of what is going to be said. So simply start to skim read through that text and get the gist of what it is that is going to be said throughout that recording.
So you're emphasizing that students really shouldn't be reading in any great detail at this stage?
Of course not. You only have 7 seconds. Yes. Yeah. So just read for the gist and, look out for those proper nouns. Look out for places, people. These are going to give you a really good clue into what the topic is of the text. And, some verbs sometimes are really key content words. And then you will have a good idea of the kind of words that you're going to be listening for.
Yeah, and also you might come across some words that might be quite tricky in terms of their spelling or even their pronunciation. And of course, those words could be some of the blanks that are needing to be filled in.
Yeah, as in, you might need to make sure that you listen carefully for certain words, and make sure that you can understand when they arise.
And also what words might come around that as well. So helping you predict your answer. But most importantly, reading through, getting an understanding, and just predicting what the answer may be based on the gaps, etc.
Yeah. Hi all. We're going to grab a quick cup of coffee. While we're gone, go to pte.swishenglish.com and grab your free PTE starter course, a gift to get you started on your PTE preparation. That's pte.swishenglish.com for your free PTE starter course.
All right, so that's 7 seconds beforehand. We can now move on to what you do during the listening section. What would be the first thing you recommend the students do during that listening section?
So during the listening section, of course, you're going to make sure that you use your cursor to follow along. That's really important. Use your cursor to follow along as you're reading to know when the word is coming that you need to really listen out for.
Yeah, because I'm sure that many a student has before, maybe you guys who are watching this podcast have thought, oh my goodness, I've lost complete track of this recording. And then you're spending so much time scrambling to read the transcript and get yourself back on track that you might have missed several words and then actually minimized your mark. Well, this might seem obvious, and we apologize if we come across as patronizing here, but just make sure that you have your cursor in a line with the text and you're using that as a reading tool. That way you minimize the chance of that happening and maximizing your listening at the same time.
Yes, definitely.
It might seem obvious, but something that could be very easily overlooked.
Yeah, exactly. And then as you're, of course, listening, take down notes for the words that you think fill the gaps. So if you at least take down the word root, well, that's really important, because with this task, the listening audio is just going to keep going. So it's not going to wait for you to, write down the full word, or it's not going to wait. It could be a long word. It's not going to wait for you to make sure that you get the correct spelling. At this stage, you don't need to worry about the spelling. Just make sure that you have at least the word root. So by that, I mean, for example, if you write down omit, okay, because you heard it is a word form of omit. So you can just write down omit, okay? And then after, and of course we'll talk about this more when we go to, after the listening, but after you can use your grammatical knowledge to make sure that you have the correct word form within the grammatical context.
Yeah, so you're trying to assess that word family. You don't necessarily have to get it completely accurate to begin with. After all, you might come across a word form that you're not 100% sure of. You might spend some extra time thinking about how that's spelt, even writing it down, that you're not actually having enough time to follow along with the
Exactly.
listening.
So make sure you don't get stuck writing down full answers, for example. You know, like the full length of the word might take too long, or really getting the spelling correct. Make sure you just write down at least the word root. Like I said, omit, and perhaps the word was actually omission, perhaps it was actually omissive, perhaps it was actually omitted.
Yep.
So if you just write down omit and move on, continue, to make sure that you're listening up and you're going to get the rest of the blanks.
That's pretty valid. Some students might be pretty confident with the word type, but they are going to come across a word that you're not sure of. So you want to make sure that you are also making sure that you keep up with the listening and don't spend extra time really thinking, deliberating about the word that was heard. You have time to do that afterwards.
Exactly. If you get stuck, then you will have to find your place again and make sure that you're at the correct gap. It could really mess it up.
Potentially that one incorrect word could cost you another 2 marks because you missed those other 2 words. Because some of the words can come in really, really close together, often in the same sentence as well.
Potentially.
And that can't be predicted as well.
Yeah,
that happens at random depending on the text.
Yeah, definitely. So you need to make sure you keep up with it.
So an emphasis on word roots. And also, do you recommend the students at all stop listening to fill in the answers in any way at all?
No, so that's just after, okay? So even it depends, the student can choose to obviously be typing it in as they go along, or using their erasable notepad. And then write them in after, so it depends on your own preference for that. But yeah, just make sure that you're just at least writing down the word root as you listen and keep up with the listening.
Yeah, we want to emphasize that this is primarily a listening task. Therefore, you shouldn't be writing or in any way reading any more than you are listening during that listening section. So make sure you're focusing on that. Everything else can come in afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, so what about after listening then, Scott?
So after listening, we did touch on that on the listening section. Of course, you're going to write down some ideas on the words that you've written down. Now it's your time to check those words, make sure they fit grammatically within the context of that gap, and also that your spelling is good as well. So as I was going to say, for example, you might have written down the word omit, but maybe the word omittance works better in the context of the sentence. Or maybe you have, for example, nature, unnaturalize, naturally. So look at the words that come around it. Try and understand your sentence structure patterns and write down that word, change it afterwards. For example, omittance is a lot harder to write than omit.
Yeah.
So therefore, it makes sense for you to write down that word root and focus on your listening and then change it afterwards. And also, as we said, remember, in the scoring, you might get the word correct, but if you spell it incorrectly, you still get 0 marks. So make sure that you check that spelling, that it's correct as well. You don't necessarily need to focus on the spelling during the listening, but make sure you do make sure you have time to correct it in the post-listening section.
In fact, we would recommend don't focus on your spelling during the listening. Yeah,
that's what I said. Yeah,
don't focus on your spelling during the listening. Just make sure that you get any form of the word down and that it's the correct word, and then you can focus on correcting things in that time after. So maybe 60 seconds, depending on how many word blanks there were.
Depends how many word blanks there are. But say, for example, there were 5 to 6 different word blanks. I think a maximum of 10 seconds for each of them would be sufficient.
Yeah.
They do. I think most students do have about 2 minutes to complete this in total, including the listening. Say the listening is 60 seconds. Then I think 60 seconds is fine for you afterwards to ensure that you have taken the time to review the answers.
Yes.
So anything else we can talk about the post-listening section?
No, that's really it. So just making sure that you have chosen your answers or you've listened, you've got some form of the word, and then you correct it based on the grammar and, of course, checking your spelling.
Perfect. All right. So let's go through a few interesting strategies and tips that students can use to improve their performance in listening fill in the blanks.
Okay.
What would be the first tip that you would recommend to them?
So based on the fact that we did talk a lot there about word roots and, assessing the different forms of the word, therefore studying word families is very important for this task. So, look up, you can find obviously all different forms of the word when you go into the dictionary, okay? So look up the adjective form, the verb form, the noun form of the word, and really study these word families, When you put students under pressure and say, okay, what is the noun form of this word?
No, even native English speakers and teachers like ourselves can blubber if we actually are put on the spot with that.
Yeah, when you put
so
people under pressure.
We wouldn't dare do that.
It's difficult to do that, But make sure that you do study these, and that you are able to say, okay, what is the noun form? And does that fit within the context of this sentence? Studying that. And just studying your sentence structures as well.
Yeah.
So that you don't only know the noun form of the word, for example, but you also are able to recognize where it is needed.
Right, exactly. So also understanding the application of the word forms in a sentence.
Yeah.
Now, it can be a little bit sort of like, varied and nebulous if students have to just obviously think, well, there's so many different word forms in different contexts, then how can I study for this appropriately? Well, just make sure if you're doing any academic reading, whether it's actually a PTE text or a PTE listening, that you take a note of any word you're not sure of. And then also, while you're not sure of that word, you might realize, oh, I know that word is actually the verb form of that noun. Great. Then you're expanding your own word tree. But you might come across a new word and a completely different tree that you might not have understood before. Make sure you take the time to assess that word form and take down synonyms of that word as well. So we just think of a general good document, which you can use application-wise in general. The word, synonyms of the word's definition, and also how that word is applied within the greater word family tree.
Yeah, definitely.
Very
so
useful.
you're talking in general, like for any listening task, of course, just building up your bank of vocabulary is really important. Because if you don't recognize the word that is missing from that blank when it is said, then it's going to be very difficult to write down any form of the word. So of course, for listening fill in the blanks, like every task in the PTE exam, really, it is really useful to continue building up your bank of particularly academic vocabulary, but vocabulary in general.
And also how very basically general grammatical rules as well about how words actually fit in a given sentence, so we know how to apply that word root research that we've done.
And yes, the other thing is, of course, for listening fill in the blanks, you are going to be listening to the words and therefore need to recognize them via their pronunciation. So it's best that you, like when you're looking up a new word, that you then have one of those dictionaries online where you can click and hear the pronunciation of the word.
Yeah, even Google does that, for example.
And you can practice the pronunciation of the word and recognize it.
You can do it on the Cambridge Dictionary and the Oxford Dictionary websites, which I would say are a general go-to resource for making sure that you obviously build up your vocabulary and practice pronunciation. I also recommend that you don't just listen to a single pronunciation of that word too.
That's a good point.
Often you'll hear the two main types of English dialect pronunciation are British English and American English. And often there can be differences in not only in the pronunciation of the word, but also the stress, the individual word stress as well. And also sometimes the vocabulary can differ between English and British English and American English too.
Of course, yeah. Yes, so make sure that you are, like you say, becoming familiar with the British pronunciation and, of course, the American pronunciation then, definitely. And yes, so any other tips then that you would like to suggest?
I reckon that's it. I think that's enough really for this task. We've kind of covered a good few things, but I just wanted to emphasize, build up your academic vocabulary, make sure you're doing plenty of listening in your own time, you're practicing pronunciation, well, not just spoken pronunciation, but also listening pronunciation as well. And you're doing plenty of adequate practice for this task as too. And hopefully you'll get your score up.
Very good. And make sure that when you do lots of listening tasks where you're also having to write down words that you hear and checking your spelling afterwards.
All right. Well, we really hope that you find this podcast to be very useful today and that you can apply this method and the tips that we give today to helping you improve in listening, the listening section, fill in the blanks for the PTE examination. It's been nice having you guys today here in this podcast. We'll see you again for some more PTE here with Swoosh English.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Are you struggling with your PTE exam preparation? Are you unsure how to get that score of 65, 79, or even 90? Let us help you get there. Please go to pte.swooshenglish.com and enter discount code PTE10 in order to receive 10% discount on any course.